Think we need to talk.
Tandy and Tyrone learn a bit more about each other's journeys. Let's break down episode 3 of Marvel's Cloak and Dagger right here on What Happened. Hey yo lovely people, Lisa here and welcome back to another episode of my recap show. Today's subject is Cloak and Dagger episode 3, titled Stained Glass because, well, it's a stained glass window that finally brings Tyrone and Tandy kind of together again. So this episode once again shows us the events of the day from both Tandy and Tyrone's perspectives, and eventually they come together to finally start asking each other the real hard-hitting questions. The show's also set in New Orleans, and so far we haven't been able to see a lot of that city come into play, but we do finally this episode as the culture and history really make a big impact when it comes to Tyrone and voodoo rituals and all of that stuff. Overall, this episode is pretty slow, I feel like, but it does feature some strong performances, I think, from Aubrey and Olivia. We also get to see finally a little bit more of Detective Riley, and it seems like she is one of the rare good cops in the sea of bad cops that we've seen on the show so far. So, let's go ahead and break down this episode. We pick up right where we left last episode when Tyrone teleported to the street and was standing in front of Tandy's car firing the shot meant for Vice Connors at Tandy, causing her to crash the car. Well, she crashes into a tree and is thrown from a car and manages to just get up and walk away with nothing but a concussion and a scrape on her head. I guess that's one of the perks of being a superhero. Anyway, she definitely has a concussion and her vision is hazy as she sees Tyrone trying to help her up but doesn't know it's him at first. He tries to be helpful, but Tandy finally realizes who he is and she's like, "Why are you trying to kill me?" And he tries to explain that he wasn't trying to hurt her. Well, it doesn't matter what Tyrone says because Tandy is ready to get back on the run, so she gets in the car to try to get it to start, and then they start hearing the cops, so she's like, "Oh, I gotta get this car going right now," and magically it works. Like, that is a beast and a tank of a car if it's still working after hitting that tree like that. She ends up driving off and leaving Tyrone behind, who has to hide in the bushes as the cops pass, and this is where our stories now diverge before they come back together. For Tandy, she cleans the car and gets rid of it and heads back to her mom's trailer where her mom and Greg are passed out. Tandy goes to clean her wound, but when her mom, who I'm gonna call Melissa from now on because that's just easier than keep saying her mom, anyways, they start to argue when Melissa comes into the bathroom, but then Melissa sees that Tandy is hurt and her attitude kind of changes a little. They're interrupted though by a knock on the door and it happens to be Detective O'Reilly who's looking for Tandy. Of course, that freaks Tandy out because she thinks that she is definitely in trouble since she knows that Liam's in jail. And she's just left that poor boy sitting in jail. But it's actually not the case. You see, O'Reilly went to talk to that guy Rick, who's the one who attacked Tandy and is in the hospital. He tries to say that he didn't see the guys who attacked him, and when he says guys, O'Reilly has like a ding 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 go off in her head because she obviously has talked to his friends and know it was a woman. She has the sketch, she's already talked to Liam. Yeah, she knows this dude's full of bullshit. When O'Reilly starts to bring up, "Oh, what are those marks on your face?" and he makes up a lie and she's like, "Well, those look like defensive marks, like from nails on your cheek." And then she's like, "How come your pants were unbuttoned when you were found?" And he's like, this guy is just like, oh no, he's got this look of fear and he immediately starts to get defensive and is like, "You know what? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember anything. I'm tired. Just leave me alone." Well, we already know that O'Reilly has all the information she needs and she knows that it was Tandy that was involved and was attacked, so she goes looking for Tandy in order to actually help her. Melissa covers for Tandy though, saying that Tandy just probably did what she always does, run away from her problems. O'Reilly then leaves Melissa her card in case Tandy wants it eventually, so Melissa goes to give it to Tandy, but Tandy has already, well, run away from her problems and hopped right out that bathroom window. She then buys a bus ticket to get on a bus, and the ringing in her ears from her concussion just keeps getting worse, and even the music that she's playing can't help drown it out. When she sits down, she closes her eyes, but when she opens them, she's surrounded by darkness on this bus. It's now empty, so she goes towards the front door where it starts to get lighter, and when the door opens, she just walks straight into the light. When she gets off the bus, she's now on a basketball court where she sees little Tyrone playing basketball. She tries to talk to him, but unfortunately, he can't hear her. We then see Billy, Tyrone's brother, walk up and start playing with Tyrone. Not long after, Billy's friends walk up and ask if he wants to go with them to get the guy back who screwed them over on the radio. So basically, it's kind of like an alternative to what could have happened if Billy had said no that day. Billy does say no this time, and then we see him hand little Tyrone a check. All of a sudden, Tandy is transported to the woods where there's a table full of weapons, and grown-up Tyrone, the age that we see him now, comes out and chooses a weapon and goes and shoots Connors. His parents are also standing there. They clap, and then they hand him a check with blood on it. And then the cops start to come get him and chase him. This then repeats multiple times with Tyrone choosing a different item off the table each time, but the result is ultimately the same. And Tandy sees this and tries to yell at Tyrone that the outcome's going to be the same. You need to try something else, but Tyrone's not hearing her. All of a sudden, she has a light dagger in her hand and she places it on the table. We then see Tyrone grab it, and it is something different. It's not a weapon. In this case, it's actually handcuffs. And so he walks up to Vice Connors, and Vice Connors starts running. Tandy then walks through a door into a shady little office that looks like one of those, check cashing places. And it seems like it's Tyrone's business for when he gets older, and there's on the floor, it's covered by a ton of checks made out to Tyrone. We then see in the office that little Tyrone is locked in there crying on the ground, surrounded by all of these checks. Tandy then sees a stained glass window and starts walking towards it, and that's when we now head over to Tyrone's part of the story to catch up to that point. Tyrone's journey to get his kind of vision into Tandy's life is a bit more time consuming. He's still confused about what's going on with him, so he goes to talk to Father Delgado but can't find him. So instead he decides to talk to Billy. And he's like, dude, are you doing this to me? And if you're not doing this to me, am I cursed? What the hell is going on with me right now? This is not regular puberty here. Evita has then come walking in and of course has overheard part of the conversation, mainly the part where he thinks that he's cursed, and she's like, you know what? I have a cure for that. So she asks Tyrone to meet him after school. We then get some beautiful shots of New Orleans as Tyrone hops on the trolley and then goes and learns what Evita's family business is and how they pay for her to go to that school. They run a voodoo tour business, and she's a tour guide. So she takes Tyrone on a tour. We talk about churches and curses and duels and all kinds of things, and they end up at Marie Laveau's tomb. Evita explains that from even beyond the grave, Marie Laveau grants wishes, and she asks the crowd for a volunteer, but we know that those people shouldn't even have bothered to raise their hands because she's naturally going to pick Tyrone. Tyrone makes his wish, and then Evita takes him to meet her auntie, and Auntie can sense that he's a person who thinks that he doesn't need help, but of course Tyrone's like, what? That's not me, and gets a little freaked out, even though he's like, yeah, that's probably true inside. Auntie then looks at the cards that she lays out for Tyrone, and there's a joker in both the hopes and fears position, and he's just kind of like, what does that mean? Hopes and fears, they're like different, right? And she says that some say hopes and fears are actually the same, and well, yeah, we kind of see that because those hopes and fears are things that both scare Tyrone and Tandy and are drawing them together and make them kind of similar, right? Anyway, Auntie says that Tyrone needs a cleansing bath to open his mind past the conscience and clear the spiritual sinuses. Tyrone thinks that bath sounds super ridiculous, and he's like, really? I'm not gonna sit and take a bath? That's like a girly thing, right? But Auntie says that there is another way that you can make this whole thing happen. A concussion, which explains why we saw Tandy also having visions. So Tyrone decides, you know what, I think I'm just gonna go with the bath rather than getting beaten over the head just for a vision. So he and Evita go to Whole Foods to get their supplies, and you know what? The bath works. Tyrone takes a deep breath, and when he opens his eyes, he's all of a sudden alone in his really dark house, and he goes to open the front door and is all of a sudden back on the top of the Roxanne building with little Tandy in her ballet outfit on the roof, and of course she can't hear him talking to her either. When the sign starts to spark and Tandy's near a puddle, Tyrone's worried she's gonna get electrocuted, so he goes to save her, and then he ends up in the forest. He now sees a glass house with a bunch of Roxanne corporate people in it, as well as Tandy's dad strapped to the car seat. Grown-up Tandy's stuck on the outside watching these guys keep killing her dad over and over, and the scenario, just like in Tandy's vision of Tyrone, keeps repeating with little different things changed, but ultimately the outcome is the same, and that outcome is Tandy running, and Tyrone just keeps yelling at her over and over like, why are you running? What do you think is on the other side? He finally yells stop so loudly at her that he has his little darkness swirl thing. It's kind of caused a hook and grabbed her behind the waist and caused her to not run. He says the same thing to her and says, you have to try something different. So we see Tandy hold up a light dagger and hold it to the window. And then all of a sudden we see a set of doors in front of Tyrone, and he walks in, and it happens to be that church that we know that Tandy lives in. But inside the church that he sees is little Tandy in, her robe, and she has a bunch of guys lined up, and it looks like her victims that she's stolen things from or conned, because we got that Rick guy there and Liam's even there, and she's giving them communion, but it's not the bread of Christ or, the little bread wafer. She's giving them pills, popping them in there, and the guys are just falling to the ground. Tyrone then looks over and sees a stained glass window and starts walking towards it. And this is obviously the same time Tandy's walking towards the stained glass window from the other side. they see each other's shadows and they both reach their hands up to touch the window, and the light and the dark start emitting from their hands, and then poof, both are suddenly awake again. We then see Tyrone walk Evita home and thank her for her help, and he now knows where he thinks he can get the answers that he's looking for. And when she asks, what did you see? He says he can't really tell her because he doesn't think that journey was his. She then says, I made a wish too on Marie Laveau's tomb a few days ago, and then she doesn't say what it is, but I think it's kind of implied that Tyrone's like, this must be what it is, and so he gives her a sweet little kiss. As for Tandy, she decides to return to Melissa's trailer and, try something new. Instead of running away, she calls Detective and is like, if you're serious about helping me, I will stay and face this. Well, unfortunately for Tandy, she calls a little bit too late, because before that call, we saw O'Reilly get in her car and there was a knock on her window, and it was none other than creepy, dirty Vice Connors, who has decided to take it upon himself to introduce himself to O'Reilly and, take care of her case for her. He says she owes him a beer for this and hands him the driver's license of Rick, the guy that Tandy robbed and then he assaulted her. O'Reilly's like, what on earth is this and where did you get it? And Connor's like, I took this thing off a dead junkie dealer's body. And this is all just a case of a mugging gone wrong. O'Reilly calls BS because she's like, that's not what any of the evidence says. But unfortunately, Connors has already gotten this cleared with the lieutenant, and Rick's lawyers are also corroborating the story. And so of course Connor's like, you're welcome and you still owe me a beer, but none of that hipster crap because you're from New York. And yeah, just like that Rick douchebag gets off. And even though he was a victim of robbery, that did not give him the right to try to sexually assault Tandy. And you can tell that O'Reilly is so pissed about this situation. And unfortunately, she can't do anything but deliver this bad news to Tandy, who leaves upset and goes back to her little abandoned church. Now, when she gets there, she realizes she's not alone because Tyrone is standing there and says, we need to talk. And it's kind of like, about time you guys decide to start talking, because that's just way too many coincidences of you two running into each other and things coming out of your hands for you to not sit down and talk already. Also throughout the episode, we saw a 3D printer making something. It turns out that was Evita's auntie, who has printed a little figure of Tyrone to add to her mantle of dolls. So now we just have to kind of wonder why he was worthy of being on that mantle, when she was like, some of these dolls have been here longer than, I don't know, the city or something. I can't remember what she said. Anyway, that wraps up the events of this week's Cloak and Dagger episode. So without even being with each other, really, our characters have started to learn more about each other through their visions. They pretty much now know each other's fears and the journey and what it could look like if they don't change something in their lives, what the results of that could be, and both of those are dangerous paths. So now we finally have these two being like, we need to sit and talk about all this weird crap that's happening to us, and I think that you're the only one that I can talk about it with. So let's watch the promo for next week's episode to see just what happens with that.
First question is, how close can we get to each other without triggering her crazy?
If you can't control yourself, then you can't control a damn thing in this world.
I don't know how it works. It has a mind of its own. Why us?
One thing I think we should also mention here is that we also got to overhear a little bit of Tyrone's mom on the phone again. And I still don't know if we really know what she does. I think in one of the first 2 episodes they said something about her being mad about a Roxxon press release getting released without her permission or something. And it seems like here she's working on a commercial or something for Roxxon and telling them they ought to keep this image, and so they have to cast certain types of people to make the company look sympathetic or something like that. That's what I think I gathered from this conversation. So it feels like she is protecting Roxxon or helping Roxxon in some way, which will prove to kind of be interesting and put these two families at odds even more probably, or at least Tyrone and Tandy, because, they're very much, Tyrone's very much into his family, Tandy not so much for her mom, but her mom is bringing that case against Roxxon, and so she's going after Roxxon, and Tyrone's mom is trying to help Roxxon. Yeah, that's going to be a big clash and big parent drama that I'm kind of excited for. I like that they're working these parents into the story more, and that they're not just real kind of just minor parent characters that don't do anything. There's a lot of shows that are like that where you have parents, but there's really no point for them to even be the parents. Here, they actually do play a part, and you'll see that more, especially in the next episode with Tyrone's dad. He kind of has a really big arc or part in the next episode. And well, with that, I think that wraps up this week's episode of What Happened for Cloak and Dagger. So what do you think about Tyrone and Tandy's visions? Do you think they're actually gonna finally try to connect, not so much in the romantic sense at this point in time, but as like, you know, hey, why do our powers have us linked together and all of that stuff? And what do you want to see happen this season? I'm actually really interested now that they're bringing Detective O'Reilly into the show a little bit more and what she's going to be doing. Because like if you actually go and Google Detective O'Reilly Cloak and Dagger, you'll see what this character is in the comics, because she's in the comics, and you'll see what her path is there. We don't know if that's exactly the route that they're going to take on the show. If they do, I feel like it'll be a slower progression, but it's kind of exciting to see. But I think she's one of the good guys, so I'm excited about that. But let me know all your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below. If you like what you see, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and then you can click right over here, because I got super excited because Drake staged the Ultimate Degrassi reunion in his latest music video, and you know that I had to talk about it. Alright, that's it for me for now. I'm Lisa. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you again next time.